not be more technologically unadvanced if I wanted to. So I was in the middle of just doing a live outdoors looking at the carnivorous plant bog, and as I thought, the temperature got too hot and the phone turned off. So I thought I would make a live here inside my back porch, and I thought we would talk about Venus flytrap. So I brought in a little Venus flytrap here for us to discuss and talk about why a Venus flytrap is carnivorous, what a Venus flytrap needs. So basically, this entire live is going to be about this amazing, amazing carnivorous plant. And so let's talk about it. So Dionaea muscipula belongs, only grows in one area in the entire world, and that is on the border of North and South Carolina, in a pine barren right off the coast. Um, it also has a small man-placed colony in the panhandle of Florida, and believe it or not, in the Bahamas, where it's grown for several decades. There used to be tons and tons and tons of different Venus flytraps, they think, but only one type of Venus flytrap exists, and that is where you get the name typical from. So this is just a bunch of typicals that are growing. Um, there are things called cultivars or cultivated variances. And so what that means is uh, all carnivorous plants, all plants really, but Venus flytraps in particular, have a tendency to mutate quite easily. And sometimes those mutations are one offs, like it'll grow two-headed traps, no traps at all. And sometimes they are very stable mutations. And so when they're stable mutations, that's when it's considered a cultivar. And so if it is stable enough, you're able to apply for a name, make it a cultivar, and then you are good to start distributing it. Now, this is for Venus flytraps. A lot of people get misinformed about this. So, Venus flytraps, in order to maintain a cultivar, you can't have seeds. So, let's say I have one that's like a big mouth or a tomato or something like that. I have to use either tissue culture or leaf pullings or divisions for it still to be considered that cultivar. Outside of that, it is just going to be an offspring and could potentially have any number of characteristics. Now, what's really cool about the Venus flytrap is that these lobes here are actually modified leaves, and within these lobes are little tiny hairs called trigger hairs. These trigger hairs do exactly that. When a bug comes across them, it triggers them, but it has to do it in a sequence twice within 20 seconds of each other. What's happening when it does that is that the trigger hair, the first one that is triggered, sets off a push of calcium that runs through from the top of the lobe down to the middle of the lobe and off balances that water level just enough. The second one, it releases a bigger wave of that calcium dispersion, which closes the trap. Now, it's not done there. Once the trap closes, it's still not ready to digest its food. It has to create a complete seal, or what is known as a hermetic seal. In order to do that, the animal, the insect, needs to continue to wiggle around and continue to trip those traps, which will release more and more calcium, which will make the seal tighter and tighter until it becomes a hermetic seal and it releases its digestive enzymes. Now, what is it doing while it's digesting in there? So, Venus flytraps are just like any other carnivorous plant. They are using a compound called chitinase to break down the chitin, and chitin is the main protein that is made in insect exoskeletons. And it actually is an evolved process. This chitinase that it uses is an evolved process from fungus. So when these plants were not carnivorous millions and millions of years ago, they used that chitinase to help fight off fungus, which had the main property was chitin. Um, Somewhere along the line, the plant was growing in nutrient poor soil, and it realized that it needed to repurpose that chitinase, and so it did so for the purpose of carnivory. Now, what's interesting about the Venus fly, well, everything's interesting about the Venus flytrap. It was first discovered in the 1700s, but really wasn't made much of note until Charles Darwin came along and started writing about it, and he called it the most interesting plant in the world. Now, there is some speculation. It's harder to tell whether or not it is rumor or if it's true that he thought that the Venus flytrap was the missing link between um, plants and animals. I doubt Charles Darwin thought that this was an animal by any means, but he did find it to be the most fascinating plant in the world, and for a good reason. Now, these little teeth on here are called cilia, and they serve a few purposes. One is they help keep the prey that they've caught in the trap until they can get that hermetic seal. But then they also allow the smaller prey that is not worthy of trapping out. And so that is very key. It's sort of like think about them as bars on a jail cell. Um, Venus flytraps grow low to the ground, but they do have multiple different types of growth habits. So Venus flytraps will have a fall trap, which is very low, rosetted to the ground. They'll have a spring trap, which tends to be a little bit more erect, and depending on the cultivar or typical, will sit a little bit higher. And they even have a summer trap, which extends even further. These leaves here are called petioles, and those petioles uh, terminate in the traps themselves. Now, it's important that you don't trigger these traps without providing it food. However, I know that can be very tempting. These traps usually only get 1 to 2 closures each before they die off, and you can kill the plant if you trip too many of them without them getting any nutrients in the process. Now, um, they grow from a central rosette, and they also grow through what is we call rhizomes, but it's actually a corm. It's a modified rhizome, and they only grow in one direction off of that corm or rhizome. And so when you are planting your Venus flytrap, it's important that you notice which way that growth is going, and it's easy to tell. And then you plant it either directly in the middle of the pot or plant it out to the corner of the pot where the live growing side of the corm is has enough room to travel. Venus flytraps require a nutrient poor soil as they've evolved to do so. They do have roots, they're very fine black roots, but these roots are more or less there to sort of anchor the plant in place. They like they grow very, very long roots that like to dip down into the water, and so because of that, they want a to be in taller pots. Let's see how tall this one is for this plant. And they like to have just a little bit of water, about that much. It could be higher if you grow them outside, but where they can reach down and get to that water line. There is a misnomer that you can get too much water. Well, I won't say it's a misnomer, it's true, but there's a caveat. If you grow these outdoors in full sun, you won't really run the risk of root rot or crown rot if with high water levels because they are getting airflow, they're getting that bright sunlight. But if you do grow these indoors, you want to be very cognizant of keeping that water lower. Some people let the trays dry out that they keep them in. You want to keep these in trays with water at all time. In the pine barrens where they grow in this sort of environment, there's a lot of pine needles. They're sitting on top, but then there's also a lot of this very acidic, inert soil, and then water table is very high. Um, in the middle of these centralized rhizome or growth points, if you will, is called the crown. That crown is where new leaves will develop from. Venus flytraps have what's called a high leaf turnover rate. So if you'll see these, see how they're dying off? A lot of people will think, because for most non-carnivorous plants, holding onto your leaves as long as possible is advantageous because it requires the most, or gives you the most energy for the least amount of effort. Carnivorous plants use their leaves for photosynthesis as well. Um, no, they do not need any. Venus flytraps do not require any stratification at all. And so, as a matter of fact, if you do soak them in water, you can run the risk of rotting the seed. So, immediately, as soon as they are created in the pod, you'll notice because they'll open up and they look like these little shiny little black beads. You can go ahead and take them and put them right on the soil surface. Make sure that the soil is moist, and then once you put them on the soil surface, take a spray bottle and spray it. That's not necessarily to loosen. You're very welcome. That's not necessarily to loosen up any sort of coating. That is just more or less to make sure that there's good contact with the soil. Now, keep in mind with Venus flytrap seeds, they can take some time to germinate. They do take a little bit longer than most plants, in my opinion. They can take upwards of a month. So don't be dismayed if you don't see it right away. And when they first grow out, their very first two leaves will not be carnivorous. So they'll just look like what would essentially be small grass seedlings. And so you might be like, oh, I got gypped. But those are to get the plant started through photosynthesis, however small and microscopic those leaves are. And then the next leaves will actually have itty bitty traps on them. It's quite amazing to see. Um, but they, yes, so they want an inert soil. They're going to want peat moss, I find to be the best, with a 50-50 mix of perlite. The reason for that is peat moss can tend, especially when it's outdoors and getting rained on, to compact down, which will they'll compact the air holes within the soil, and which will essentially suffocate the roots through a process called anaerobic conditions, and this will rot those very fine roots. You want to make sure that you have that perlite in there. You can use certain sands. You just need to make sure it's inert sand, or else it will cause mineral buildup. These plants want to be grown in plastic pots. You can use terracotta pots if they're glazed. However, I always strongly recommend not doing this because sometimes the glazing can wear off and the plant can start to begin to leach minerals from the pot. Venus flytraps are exceptionally tough plants, despite what you've been told probably about them. Part of this leaf turnover rate that I was talking about is that they will grow new leaves and kill off these leaves in a very rapid pace. And so a lot of people think that that is a sign of early onset death for them, and it is not. That is something that they do, and they will grow new leaves out of that central point. Um, Sure. Yeah, that'll be fine. The only thing that I would say with the holes being in the side of the pot is just make sure that you are keeping the soil moist. It certainly does not have to be sopping wet. It's better that it is not, but you just want to make sure the soil is moist. Having that airflow is important. And so that will help out as well. But just with the side holes, just make sure that you're not losing too much moisture too fast, especially if you're growing them outdoors in full sun. Even in a pot size this big, this plant dries out very fast. So keep an eye on that. Um, what else can I tell you about the amazing Venus flytrap? They require inert water as well as inert soil. So you're going to want to use distilled reverse osmosis and or rainwater. Rainwater, of course, being their preferred choice because that's what they've evolved to use. Now, here's where a lot of people mess up with Venus flytraps. They will get them brand new and they will put them in and use their tap water, and their tap water will potentially contain too many minerals. These plants will not react right away. They will seem fine for up to 2 or 3, even maybe 3 weeks, even a month, and then they will die off rapidly. That is because what's happening under the soil here is these minerals are building and building and building. Now, there's a misnomer. You can't boil these minerals off. You can't filter them out with regular filters. You would need to use a reverse osmosis system. Um, your tap water could potentially be used, but you need to make sure that its parts per million is under 50. And the way you can do that is get yourself a TDS meter, total dissolved solids meter, on Amazon. Great tool, very cheap. You can get them as low as $4 to $5, and it will help you out tremendously. Venus flytraps are exceedingly um, sensitive to minerals in their soil and or water, especially copper. And so you want to make sure that if you're using any sort of runoff, you are checking that for its mineral content. If it has copper in there, like if it's copper pipes and you're using that runoff from that, you could be setting yourself up for failure. As far as light goes, Venus flytraps want a ton of light. 10 to 12 hours of direct south facing light is perfect for them. You will know that they're getting enough light because most cultivars will be standing erect like this. If your plants are have very long petioles that are sort of flopping over, that is a good indicator that your plant is searching for light. If it has petioles that are very wide and very green, that is also a good indicator that it is searching desperately for light. And that is because um, think about what plants do, right? The larger the leaf, the larger the surface area. The larger the surface area, the more sun that it can get. And so if these plants are under duress because they're not getting enough light, they will create larger leaves to try to get that sunlight. Um, they are susceptible to heat. I just made a video about this, a long form video. They like temperatures right around 68 to 85, 87 degrees in their comfortability zone. Now they can handle temperatures exceedingly colder than that and exceedingly hotter than that. But if they go long periods of time, like here in Florida, at temperatures in the high 90s, even low hundreds, they will start to fry their pitchers. And here's a good example of that. See that one? See how that looks different than this, which is a normal die off of the leaves. Now, this won't kill your plant most of the time. It's just a stress response. If they go months and months and months dealing with this, it will weaken the plant. And so you need to keep an eye on that. But for the most part, they're very hardy. They're flowering. They will produce flowers profusely the first part of spring. Their flowers get incredibly tall stalks for the size of the plant, and it is thought that they do that to prevent their pollinators from becoming prey. But I also think, in my opinion, they do that to get through all the pine grass and stuff, or the pine needles that have fallen on top of them in the wild. Their flowers are white, pure white, pretty unimpressive. I think they're beautiful, but they're just basic flowers. And they do need to be pollinated. They're not like a perfect flower like a sundew, depending on the sundew. They can be self-pollinated. You can actually use one flower and then pollinate it with another flower. Now, it will make a weaker seed set and a weaker plant, but if you're just doing it for trial and error, you can do it that way. The best option, of course, is to pollinate it with another Venus flytrap. Um, They tend to like larger pots, and so especially if you're growing them outdoors in the heat, tall, think height more than width, but if you can give them both, you will be setting your plant up for the best success. They do go dormant, depending on where you live. Dormancy is contingent on two things: the photo period. With the sun, as the sun goes down, depending on where you live, the photo period shrinks. It indicates to the plant it's time to go to sleep. And then also the coolness. Once it starts cooling down below that 68-degree mark, it will start slowing down and think about dormancy. Now, depending on where you live, they may go through what is I call a soft dormancy, and so that means that they'll keep some of their leaves, but for the most part, they'll remain at a very uh, close rosetted, hugging the ground sort of plant. If you live in an area that gets a very hard freeze, they could die all the way off and look like they're completely dead. Um, they can handle temperatures very low into the single digits. The biggest thing with them is you can put pine needles on top of them to help protect their crowns, but also water is important. So you hear this misnomer about keeping the pots a little bit more dry in the winter. That's actually not a good thing. Think about what water does. Water is an insulator, and so if you have higher water marks and it's going to be freezing outside, that water is going to insulate those rhizomes in here from that direct cold, blasting, freezing wind and temperatures. This is where larger pots come in handy for a lot of different things. Larger pots in general are great for any plant, but for Venus flytraps, it's great because it helps to control the soil temperature, whether that is summertime when it's blazing hot outside or when it's wintertime and it's frigid outside. It will help moderate the fluctuations in the soil temperature. As far as feeding them, if you grow them outside, they will catch more than food than they could possibly ever need. But if you do want to feed them, make sure you feed them live insects. And so you're going to want to do, you can get mealworms from a local pet food store, or you can just feed them insects that you find around the house. If you use dried food, you are going to need to simulate the movement by wiggling the trap around when it's closed to help get that hermetic seal that I told you about. Very important. Without that hermetic seal, it will not produce the enzymes. Now, you don't want to feed this people food. You don't want to feed it jelly beans or any of this other stuff that you hear people doing. It will eventually kill your plant and it will very much stress them out. They want insects. That's what that's what they've evolved to eat, and that is what they want. Anything really will do. These things aren't too picky when it comes to insects. If it will get in their trap and they can close it, then they're good. Now, in the course of a couple days up to a week, it will eat and digest that insect, and then it will open up, and there will be just a carcass. Leave that carcass in there. That's an evolutionary trait to attract other scavenger insects to go in there to try to get whatever they can off the carcass, and then that becomes a second meal. If the bug is large enough, that trap will no longer need it, and it will kill the trap off after it's done eating, or the trap itself might just rot because of the size of the bug and the juices. All perfectly fine. Leave it there, and it will grow a new one. What else can I tell you about this beautiful, amazing plant? These plants are exceptionally easy to grow once you get their basic settings down. I'm giving you a ton of information here. You certainly don't need all this information to keep Venus flytraps alive. But if you're serious about growing them, as I am, I have a huge passion for them, um, then following these steps will help ensure their long term survival. A singular plant can live upwards of 20 years. Now, with divisions, it essentially can live on uh, for eternity, however long the earth is here. Um, it does divide quite often. If you do get seeds, it will take them about 7 years to fully to mature and flower from those seeds. So what I recommend people do is buy full size plants, buy starter plants, and then buy seeds, and that way you get a whole experience. Growers are doing things to speed up that process, but if you're wanting to do it the natural way, it will take 7 years. So it is a passion of patience and love. You will need to up pot these plants. I don't usually up pot them every couple of years. I know some growers up pot them every year. That can get expensive, and I'm not about that life. You will you will notice that they need up potting because they'll start pushing against the sides of the pot, and it will slow down their growth, or their rhizomes will start to grow like down into the soil. Well, they're in the soil, but it'll start going even further in. Back to water, they can handle a wide variety of water levels, even submerged at times, as long as they're grown outdoors. I tell people all the time the key to any plant, any carnivorous plant really, is the proper water, the proper light, the proper soil, and airflow. If you can get all those things down, and it's not that difficult, especially if you grow them outdoors, it pretty much takes care of it by itself, other than the soil and sometimes the water. These plants will thrive for you. Now, you have a couple options when you divide them. Usually, you want to divide them when they're dormant. So, right before spring growth hits, you want to divide them out. and they're easy. You sort of just move the rhizome back and forth, and it'll pop off. Just you don't have to have one with roots on it, but it's a good idea to have roots on the rhizome piece that you're popping off. That way, it has the biggest chance of success for growing. There are other ways to propagate this plant, and I want to talk to you about that. You can do leaf pulling. So I could take this leaf right here and pull it off. All I want to do is push my finger down in here and make sure you'll hear a crack and make sure I get some of that white rhizome with it. And then you just stick that leaf in the soil. And if you have an area that's humid, you're good there. But if you want to cover it to keep it more humid, and it'll grow. There's about a 45% strike rate for that. So I could take this pot of plants right here and make hundreds of Venus flytraps. They'll all be clones, of course, of these typicals, but that's okay. The other way you can do it is through flower stock. The flower stock can be cut either in one whole piece or in pieces as small as 1 inch long and could be stuck in the soil surface. And it will look like the flower stalk dies off, but in a course of about a month to 2 months, it'll start growing new Venus flytraps. It's an exceedingly fun plant to grow. Once you get it down pat, you're good to go. You have a couple options. You can grow typicals, which is this right here. All of these were rescues from Lowe's and Home Depot and Walmart. You can also get cultivars through companies like California Carnivores, Predatory Plants, Carnivorous, Sarracenia Northwest, all Rainbow Carnivorous plants, all great places to buy these. Those cultivars will have all different types of variances and things, but all of them require the same care. The only ones I would say as a caveat are the reds. The red ones sometimes require a little less heat and a little less light because that red helps absorb sunlight and heat, whereas this green is pushing it away. If you do want to grow these indoors, you're going to want to make sure you have a very bright grow light for them. And so, what you're going to want to look at is PPFD. That is the most important factor when looking at grow lights. It will be on the lights themselves. That PPFD is the amount of light that is absorbed by the plant. And so, you want to make sure that you have the correct amount. If you do grow them with grow lights, just keep in mind that remember what I told you, the 4 tenets: the right soil, the right water, the right light, and airflow. And so you don't want to give them too much water because that will reduce their airflow. You just want to make sure their soil is moist to the touch. So in other words, when I push on the soil, I shouldn't see water coming back up towards me. You can let the trays dry out in between watering. Just make sure that the soil stays moist. It seems sort of like there's all these little details and everything in it, but once you get it down, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, and it's perfectly fine. If you grow them outdoors, they can handle all of those things with a lot larger variances. I've had these plants with water all the way up to here, and they've done just fine. Certainly, I don't want to do that for long periods of time, but they can handle it. This video could literally be an hour just about Venus flytraps and how the main thing I want to take away from this is I'm giving you a ton of information because I want you to be successful at growing them. They aren't this plant that has the stigma they have where they're extremely difficult to grow. They're actually, in my opinion, I've been growing carnivorous plants and non-carnivorous plants for years. They're, in my opinion, one of the easiest plants to care for. They're extremely, extremely hardy if you just get those few basic things down, and they will basically take care of themselves. They're one of the few plants that I can kind of set and forget as long as when I grow them outside, of course, because nature takes over after that. But I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's coming up now on 30 minutes talking about Venus flytraps, but all of this information is very critical. And if you follow this live in detail, you will be successful at growing these plants. Again, I'm always a resource. I'm available to you at any point, anytime. If you have questions at all about growing these plants, Don't hesitate to reach out, comment on this video, share this video so we can get the word out there. These, besides a few other Sarracenias, are some of the most um, critically endangered plants. Poaching is a risk to them. They are also at risk for encroachment and land development. And so it's important to me that we get carnivorous plants in everybody's collection. But Venus flytraps, in my opinion, should be the centerpiece of everybody's collection because of just how at risk they are. I'll probably make a part two of this because, believe it or not, there's even more that I could cover with you. Thank you all for being a part of this live. I hope you've enjoyed these beautiful, beautiful plants. And if you have any questions for me at all, don't hesitate to ask. I hope you guys have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. See you soon. Bye bye.